Welcome, everybody. This is a special edition, very special edition of Blerdlines. We are talking adaptations, and today we're going to start with Dune. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing here, we're taking a very close look at some of the finest science fiction and fantasy pieces out there. We're looking at the text, the source material, or what I like to call the source text, as well as the script, and then obviously the screen adaptations. Today specifically, we're looking at Frank Herbert's Dune, the first book, which is broken down into 3 parts. It's a really thick tome. And we're also going to be talking about the Denis Villeneuve 2-part film, which is adapted from that book. With me today, I have my man Kam and my man Josh. They will be joining me as my fellow Dune experts to teach you all we need to know about Dune. Say what's up, fellas.
Yo, Liet Kam in the house.
Liet Kam.
Oh, man. Gurney Josh. See, these guys went with the naming of, so I guess I'll be Professor Thufo. Even though he just disappears in part 2 of the movie, never to be seen again. Kind of.
Go ahead, Josh.
That's a kind of sort of. Yeah, his character, and we'll get into it from when we talk as we unpack the differences between the adaptation and the source text. But first and foremost, I wanted to throw it to Liet Kam to get his instant reaction, because of the 3 of us, he's recently freshly read the novel. And so it's all in his mind, the details and the verisimilitude that isn't in the movie, the stuff that is and isn't. So what did you think about, take us through your experience of reading Frank Herbert's Dune, the vaunted Dune, because everybody talks about how it's an experience reading that book. It's not just a regular pick up a book and then have at it.
Thank you. I will say it does help sometimes to watch a movie before reading the book for myself. It does put images in my head, even though it does take away from the creativity of my own imagination of putting people and places together. It did help me find reference points. I will say I'm not mad that I watched the movie before I read the book. And taking on Dune, it wasn't as difficult because I started to read again. But if you are not akin to just reading a book, it's not heavy material, but it's just thick. It's a lot to take on. And I will say I enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't know if this is one of the, if not the greatest science fiction writing that I've read so far in my 10-year reading, but it's up there because of how in-depth the character nuances and the world are developing in this book, or Herbert's vision. And I will say I did have a difficult time because I was so far removed from watching both movies once I got into the book, because I completely forgot details in the movie that I was trying to reference point in the book. But I enjoyed the book because it was nonstop action. I got more in-depth detail about characters, and characters that weren't presented in the film, for better or worse. That's just a personal preference. And I'm sure that the director, I'm going to just refer to him as Denis, had made choices, because from what I heard from other people who are very familiar with Dune, the book, and all the movies they've watched, some people say Dune is unfilmable. I can totally understand that. It's a lot to take in. It's so much going on, so many characters, so many reference points, so many terms you have to understand and learn, and there's a lot of backstory and lore. After reading the book, I enjoyed the movie. I can't compare it to other movies because, again, I'm coming in fresh. I know of Dune. I've never watched it. I know of the infamous or famous 84 version of Dune. I know there's been many series, but I've never watched it. But I know what Dune is, but I've never read it, never watched any iteration of it. And I would have to say I thoroughly enjoyed the book. I thoroughly had a more fundamental understanding. It was very interesting to break bread with my fellow co-host about the things that were missing from the film that I realized in the book, and just finding a joy in that. Certain characters that stood out, having a better appreciation for characters like Baron Harkonnen, and which wasn't displayed in the movie as much, but in a different way. Understanding the inner thoughts of minor characters like Paul Atreides' father, Leto, and what his thought was before his untimely passing, and the betrayal. And like I said, I was like wondering what happened to Thofar in the movie. I was like, what the hell happened to him? But when I read the book, I understand, why he probably wasn't in this scene or whatever. It was a director's choice. But
it was a really big subplot, and probably just said,
it probably wasn't needed. But I felt one character that wasn't mentioned, but I don't know. I feel like they could have mentioned it in some way. Was and I'm fast forwarding here, was Hera, and how much of a part in the book she played.
Well, let's stop right there, because I think it merits explaining who Hera is for people who probably have seen the film versus having not read the book. Who Hera is to Paul Atreides.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys can, fill in the gaps. But Hera is the widow, quote unquote, of Jameis, who Paul fought in a duel to earn his right of passage, being a part of the tribe. And in the book, Paul kills Jameis in a ritual, and he inherits everything of Jameis: water, women, the children, and all that. And it's a significant thing in their tribe and their culture. And I felt like in the movie, they kind of brushed over that. They also kind of, I don't know if the movie brushed over the importance of water, because water is important, but it's like spice is a big thing.
Well, to your point about that, and I just wanted to, before we get past it, they did kind of trivialize the importance of water. It's not like it was not well done, because they still give you the visual sense of how important water is, especially spice. But there are moments that I feel what you're saying. I couldn't understand why, like, for example, when Paul kills Jameis in the book, he cries, and this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Everybody that's involved. It's a big deal for Jessica.
Don't be out here crying, you wasting water.
Right, exactly. So it's a big deal for everybody. The Fremen they're not just telling him, stop crying or wasting water. They are genuinely surprised that he is giving his, as they call it, giving his water to the dead. And so I think those kinds of cultural nuances, not being in the film, you kind of question why at least isn't that moment there? Because
I think they make it they make it
right. They do make it subtext.
Yeah,
they do make it subtext. But what I'm saying is that when that part isn't as much subtext, about him giving his crying and giving his water, I think a character Shani or someone could have had that line, and it wouldn't have taken away from the overall design of what he's like. That's what I'm saying.
They do say something about that later on. Like, somebody's crying. I think Jessica cries, sheds a tear, she's about to throw up, and they're like, hey, hold your water, lady.
Yeah. When he said that, I was like, oh man, like that, because he's like telling her to, he's like, don't do it. Hard damn is so good. Still, he's like, don't do it, don't. And he's legitimately upset about it, and I'm just like, wow, that's disgusting. But at the same time, it's water.
So again, coming from not reading the book, I didn't understand the significance of that moment. You understand? So those are the little nuances that was lost. And like I said, for better or worse, it doesn't take away from the movie, but it does give a deeper appreciation of what is valued on Arrakis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Water, because it's like the hierarchy is spice, water, guild, all that stuff. But like spice in the water is the main thing in the book, in my opinion, that's valued between the Fremen and everybody that's inhabiting that planet.
Yeah, spice is important to the Imperium, to the known universe. So, that's how they say they mention that's how they have achieved interstellar travel. As far as the Spacing Guild finding safe pathways. And again, these type of the way they talk about these things is the equivalent of someone in Star Wars talking about jumping to hyperspace, or whatever. It's like, no, Frank Herbert is going to say his description of it is they're not traveling faster than the speed of light. They're finding pathways that are safe that allow them to travel safely from one spot to the next. And the visual setup that Denis Villeneuve gave was almost like wormholes, right? Like these the folding of space is what spice allows, so that they can punch a hole and cut down the amount of time that it would normally take to travel from, let's say, Caladan to Arrakis. In normal, as far as normal space travel is concerned, and he doesn't describe what that is in his storytelling, because that's the point is not to get too hung up on the tech.
Yeah, and there was a few things. Like I said, the book did give me how much of a good and bad thing spice is, opposed to the movie. Like, spice in the book, spice is the drug that it extends your life, but once you're on it, you're hooked. And if you're on it too much, without getting into spoiler territory, because I don't know, I've only read Dune, and I think we talked about this offline, B, is that once you get so much spice in you, like, what's the Baron's Mentat before he gets murdered by Leto, Peter?
Yeah, Pietro, Peter, or Peter, something like that.
We'll call him Peter. But he was so good, I felt like you couldn't leave Arrakis once you hook the spice, unless you take a piece of Arrakis with you, which is having a continuous spice, because you're on that. I don't feel like the movie gave me that sense of how bad of an addiction spice was.
I was gonna say, I think it depends, right? It depends on who you are and your status in life, right? Because Shaddam, the Emperor, had been using spice for a long time to extend his life. In fact, he's implied to be at least over a century old at the time of Dune, but he doesn't look like it. He looks like a man that's in his 60s or in it, because he's been using spice. But they have ways, especially with the Fremen, they have ways to create spice palettes without it turning into clawing your Tyrone Bigham's addiction. They are able to. The only reason Paul is affected so adversely is because spice triggers his prescient sight in a way that nothing else does. And before he drinks the water of life in the Lisan al-Gaib or the Kwisatz Haderach, or whatever you want to call it, the Mahdi, before that sight is born, whenever he got hit by spice, it was just like sensory overload, almost like a seizure, if you will. It almost like epilepsy, tantamount to epilepsy. He was seeing all of this stuff, past, present, and future, and having no idea what it meant or how to suss out how to actually read it like a book.
Right.
Exactly.
I agree. What was the one thing the one thing I noticed in this futuristic world, we talked about this also offline, there was no computers, no technology. What I've come to realize is that in the world of Dune, the Mentats, or there's some history and lore about why this came to be, but I realized that in Dune, they were taught that the human mind, they got to the peak of the human mind. And so that's why you have these Mentats, these quote unquote supercomputers, but in human form, and they think in a brain. But what I realized, I was like, they're not using any technology, no computers, no things to think for you, compute and analyze. It's all humans.
Yeah, it's all practical, all human beings. Yep.
I found that very interesting. Usually when we deal with science fiction, there's that sense of the human dependency on technology, where in the world of Dune, we don't have that. And you were mentioning, and you could probably further elaborate, Herbert purposely did that for a reason, based on real world, I don't want to say semantics, but real world things he's experienced in his lifetime.
Yeah, definitely. And the biggest thing is that there's an event that takes place in the Dune universe called the Butlerian War. And the Butlerian Jihad, to be very specific. And that's sort of where the philosophy comes into his storytelling. Each war conflict is treated like a holy war, but it's not holy entirely in a religious sense. It's holy in a philosophical sense, meaning that the Butlerian Jihad was about the idea that technology is not helping humanity in a way that is long lasting. It's making us pliable. Exactly. Thank you, Josh. Codependent, as well as stifling our ability to adapt and survive. That's what at the heart of Herbert's story is really happening, about the various things that take place in human society that hampers our ability to adapt, survive, and even evolve, like a mentat or whatever, political leadership and leaders doing everything for people. That takes away that Darwinism of people having to adapt and think on their own, think to survive. How many of us can say that we can actually do anything beyond basic arithmetic without the use of a calculator? And that's what the mentat was. It's like, yeah, you can probably access this aspect of the human brain, but we put so many things in our lives from a very young age that gets in the way of that evolution. They kind of dealt with it a little bit in the TV series Fringe with the cortexiphan, and how Walter Bishop and Dr. Bell theorized that after a period of time, the human brain not only stops growing, but it completely gets rid of the imagination, so basically mind over matter doesn't work because we don't believe it, and that it's totally pushed out of us by a certain age. Josh, give us your thoughts on the two comparisons of the book, because I know you've read all the way to God Emperor of Dunes, just as I have. And full disclosure, Josh is the reason why I actually picked up the book and read it in the first place. So he's definitely the OG Dune maestro.
So I should be thanking Josh for my journey.
Yes, you should thank Josh, because the lineage begins with him.
I mean, well, first of all, I didn't think that we'd have a fringe reference and a Tyrone Biggums reference in this conversation. So that's fine.
Yeah, that's what you get with the professor.
As far as, I think each iteration of Dune brings something different to the table. Obviously, the 80s version was a hatchet job, but somehow still watchable. It was ahead of its time. It was way ahead of its time, and confusing as all hell when you watch it with
Lance doing too much though, and so you're right.
Doing too much, and then the studio sort of doing a hatchet job on what was included in it from the books, because there's a lot that's missing, and then they sort of accelerate a bunch of things. So there's a bunch of it when you read the books does not make a whit of sense as far as what was on screen. I would say the most thorough version was probably the Sci-Fi Channel version, which I also had D'Angelo watch.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 6-parter.
Josh not only got me to watch it, I got so excited when he told me about it. It reminded me that it existed, that I went to Amazon, found a region 2 of the Blu-ray, took the chance, bought it. It actually worked, and I watched it, and he's right. It is absolutely the most comprehensive live-action adaptation of Frank Herbert's work.
And so I was working for...
Wait. Josh, 1 second.
Yep.
When did this do? This is a miniseries?
Yeah, it's a miniseries. There's 2 miniseries. There's Dune, and then there's Children of Dune. 2 miniseries on my channel
of the first books.
What year did this come out?
Early 2000s, so maybe like 2006 or 7.
I think the first one was dropped in like 03, 04, and then the second one, because they released Children of Dune, I think 2 years or a year after the first one, and that one dropped a couple years later. That one dropped a couple years later.
It was like 06 or 07, somewhere thereabout. And also great. That's also a great miniseries. And as far as I know, James McAvoy's debut, and he nails it. But yeah, I would say the Sci-Fi Channel joint is probably the most exhaustively detailed. It looks like a 90s. It looks like a 90s miniseries. But you forgive it because of how detailed, how detailed a rendition of the story it is. It's even more detailed than DV's version. But DV version.
Sorry, just wanted to add to what you just said. Remember the scene where Alice Krieg, who takes over the role as Jessica in Children of Dune, and she's just amazing, brilliant actress, character actress. But when she's there's a scene where she is either fighting with Alia or someone tries to attack her, and you can see the Bene Gesserit movement and the way that it looks like she's like, like the Matrix dodging bullets. Like you can see that visual thing that DB didn't include was amazing in the song. Yeah. It was fluid. It looked like a dancer, but you could tell like she was nice with it. Like it was like, and this is Jessica, older Jessica, like in her maybe 50s, 60s.
Yeah, 50s. Yeah.
But still, just like nobody was messing with her in terms of, but they showed you visually the kind of power and skill that the Bene Gesserit possessed. And I don't think you really saw that in the films. You got it, you understood it, but you didn't really see it in this version.
But you didn't see it. Yeah, agreed. And I think God.
No, I was gonna say, to speak on that. See, again, this is my opinion. I think, I don't know. You're saying that this miniseries is the most comprehensive Dune, but again, I feel like you got to almost kind of go through the gauntlet and watch every one of them, because every one of them presents a little something that the other one might not be seeing.
Oh, absolutely. That's 100% true. Yeah. When I say comprehensive, I just mean that this is the one that literally is from page to screen. They don't
literally take it page by page, 100%.
Yeah. Like that's what I meant. But you're right. Absolutely right about what you said.
Yeah, because the weirding way, the way she fights, we don't catch that in DV. And I kind of really like, you know what I'm saying? So when I'm reading it, I'm like, yo, she's kind of.
They only said it once. And that was when Stilgar goes to try to kill her, and and she takes him down like right. It wasn't like nothing. And he's saying this in the movie. He's like, why didn't you tell me you were weirding?
And you were like, oh, my bad. I
Yeah.
didn't know it. I
But
didn't know what you
didn't see that.
I couldn't visually like how special, how Jedi-like she was,
Yes.
because they're basically like Catholic Jedi ninjas,
Basically, yeah. That's a good way to describe them. They're basically like Catholic, a cross between Catholicism, Jedi, and ninja assassins. Like they have those type of, as wise as a Catholic priest, and as quick as a freaking ninja, and as skillful as a Jedi. They're all of those things.
And and you see that in Children of Dune as well. Like when James McAvoy is like fully realized and he comes to depose his aunt. Yo. The scene where the guards try to take him down is pretty much exactly what Dee just described in terms of Jessica's movements being almost Matrix-like. Same deal. And they hold off on it until the very end of the film. It's super gratifying.
Yeah, Leto becomes almost like he becomes like a three combination of having Paul's prescient visions, Jessica's Bene Gesserit powers, and Shia the strength
and the strength of a worm. Yeah,
of a worm, and he eventually becomes Shia or a worm. But that takes time, and it happens. It doesn't. You don't see that in the book, but Leto does say that that's what's in his future. He knows what he's going to become, and he chooses to become that to put them on the golden path. Now, I won't mention the golden path because you're gonna read it. So Josh knows what I'm talking about with the golden path. It's my favorite thing in all of sci-fi, and of all of of Dune, and all of the philosophical concepts that Herbert had presented. The golden path and the idea behind it is my favorite thing in Dune.
Can I ask you guys? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, interesting how the golden path ends up being the thing that Paul shies away from, even though humanity has to go through it. And then Leto didn't want to do it. Yeah, Paul didn't want to do it. And Leto is like, oh, hell yeah, this has to happen. Are you kidding me? And he
Leto is a very interesting character in that he's undoubtedly a protagonist villain, but he's not evil, and he has a reason for the way. There's righteous purpose that's not tied to narcissism or him being a sociopath, to why he puts humanity on the golden path. But by contrast, that's the exact reason why Paul avoided it at all costs. But also Paul knew that at some point it was going to happen. He just wasn't going to do it. And he refused to do it, and he allowed himself to first things to happen to him to take him off the board in order for him not to have to do it.
I was going to ask both of you guys. Sorry. I was going to ask both of you guys before we go any further. Was there any moments, and this is going back to DV's film, was there any moments that you felt were missing from the film that the book talked about or you read about that should have been in the movie? Or you just be like, yo, this is a fine translation of DV's Dune?
Go for it, Josh.
I mean, it's been a while since I've read the book, so it's a little difficult for me to say that there were things that were I'll put it to you like this. The choices that DV made specifically didn't hurt the film. There were some things that were surprising that were missing, but his choices were smart, they were informed, and they didn't hurt the movie at all. And I think he made more significant changes than he did leaving things out. There were a few key things that he left out, but I think the changes that he made, specifically like with Shani, with Zendaya's character, for example, that I think stood out more than the things that he left out, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, and by contrast, I don't think there's anything that they left out of the Sci-Fi Channel joint. It pretty much covers all the territory. And at least,
that one.
There are things that it touches on, maybe, that they could have expanded on a little bit more, but there's no untouched space. There's no covered space.
Yeah, I think I agree with Josh. I think it's hard to say that the things that he doesn't include should have been there. Like I don't think
impactful.
Exactly. Like I don't think the subplot of Gurney and Thufir believing that it was Jessica who betrayed them and Gurney going on his sort of mission to try to assassinate her, I think that would not have played well in his film, because there are certain things that you have to establish in order for that to work. And one of the things is you have to establish the dynamic between Gurney Halleck, Thufir Hawlett, Duke Leto, and Jessica. So even going further back, you have to then establish and describe for the audience what concubine means in this setting and in this context. Because when people see concubine, they think different things, versus paramour, versus side piece or whatever. Like it's in Dune, it's not a paramour. It's not a side piece. A person can have a concubine, and that person is, as you saw with Jessica, she's extended all the privileges and rights of being as if she were the lady of the house. They call her Lady Jessica. They listen to her commands. They don't. A lot of them are scared of her too, and with good reason. One of the things I love about, speaking of Jessica, of what DB did, is he really shows just how much of a dark presence Jessica is in Paul's life, in terms of her designs versus the Bene Gesserit's designs versus what Paul wants versus what Leto wants. In the previous films, they softened Jessica a lot. And they make her a little more sympathetic. In this case, you see just how rotten Lady Jessica can be and how determined she is to flip the Fremen to Paul's side, even the ones that are reluctant to join him. And she uses the fact that they are superstitious and afraid of not just her, but even doubly afraid of Alia. I mean, they're absolutely terrified of Alia before she's even born. And she isn't born in the film, in DV's film, but in the book, obviously she's born well before they make it into the throne room and confront Baron Vladimir and the Emperor. Go ahead, Cam.
So I don't know if this falls on my feelings about what I'm about to say falls in the fringes of could have possibly been in the movie, but I can kind of almost understand why it was not in the movie.
What you talking about? The her being born and
what I'm about to. Okay. Yeah. So I think in the film, I don't think Fade Rotha's character was done any justice, in my opinion. I get why he's not as significant in the film, but the book gets to expound on him a little bit more, what gives me an understanding. And I think his screen time, Fade Rotha's screen time, should have been more.
Yeah, and also to your point, he is a point. See, that's the thing. Vladimir Harkonnen, Fade Rotha Harkonnen, they're point of view characters in the book. You get their point of view. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the very second chapter is literally inside Baron Harkonnen's head, where he literally goes, outlines his plot. He's talking to Peter and Rabban and all of them, and he's talking about why the Emperor is a jealous man, but they're gonna make the best of it. They're gonna destroy the Atreides. He's happy about that. Finally, all that stuff is weird. Constantly looking at Fade Rotha in a just perverted way. All of that is given to you in those early chapters. Now he doesn't stay with his point of view. I think after part 1, we don't get any more point of views from the Baron, but I could be wrong. But I do know that Fade Rotha was a point of view, and so was Baron Harkonnen.
So in short, I would say about Fade Rotha, I think he should have got a little bit more screen time in DV's version. I would like to know what happened to Thor Howard throughout this movie. I mean, maybe he'll appear. I don't know. He can't appear now based off the book. Maybe they will. I don't know how they'll do it. But it was just really odd that he just disappeared and we had no mention of him. But he's still a part of that book, heavy in later chapters.
Still, but more tied to that subplot of Jessica. And also, he was being used as a mentat reversely for Baron Harkonnen. But I think the calculus might have been, and I don't know what exactly what DV's creative choice or why he chose this was, that in all of the commotion, we can just assume that Thor Howard, who wasn't a warrior, that he was killed, like almost instantly that he was murdered by either a Sardaukar,
right?
Yeah, exactly, or one of Harkonnen.
If that is a possibility I didn't think about, if we just assume that he's murdered, okay, I can live with that. The choice to not bring Alia out in a way where I got to see her true power. However, he did convey the message because the Fremen were afraid of her based on the technicality of not knowing Jessica was pregnant, because they probably needed the ritual knowing that. But
definitely they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Obviously. So that part where, DV kind of changed it, or how Baron is murdered, I was like, oh, she's a badass, right? I mean, I got that, but I really got that in the novel. And how,
that's how she earned her name, though. which is interesting that he's planning to do Dune Messiah and the stuff that he excluded. I'm just curious of how he's going to work that out, because her killing Baron was a big deal, and it earned her name, Alia the Night. It confirmed things that many people already suspected, which was that she is extremely dangerous and extremely powerful for someone who should not even be speaking.
Yeah.
At that point.
So I felt like I don't want to say the movie robbed us, because there's still opportunity to show that, but I felt like I didn't get a true sense of Alia or Alia. How would we pronounce it? Alia, right? What else? There was one, and I'm not saying these are good or bad things. These are just things I felt could have been touched on in a certain way. We don't have to expound on them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is precisely why Dune for so many years has been called unadaptable.
Yeah,
unfilmable. Yeah,
unfilmable. Which I'm glad you brought that up, because it brings us back to the whole point of this series, which is really looking at adaptations and trying to understand some of the creative choices that these storytellers are making, because they do have to make certain choices. Things do get left off on the cutting floor when you go from page to screen, because you cannot shoot things and do it the exact same way that it's described in prose.
And here's a perfect example of that is Leah Kine's death. The way they did it in the movie is fine. The way I read it, this is like a philosophical death.
Yes, exactly.
So,
there was something. Yep.
You can film that, but the audience wouldn't get that. Where it translates better in the book than visual.
Yes. Now they did film it for the miniseries, so that's what
I saw that.
Yeah,
I did see that.
Yeah.
But in this we're referencing DV's version. I get why that was changed. I had no qualms with making Kinds a woman. Doesn't even matter for the
that.
You know what I'm saying? So we can get that out of the way. But I was just like, yeah, I can understand why certain things didn't or were changed and didn't make it. But I was confused though. when Paul drinks the water and Jessica drinks the water, I felt like in the book that happened at the same time or kind of at the same time, but in the movie it felt like two different times. It was weird the way I read it and the way it was visually.
What I remember is
It's been a while.
she drinks the water, and it's from her point of view, if I'm remembering it correctly. So the whole thing was that she obviously they have to transmute the poison in their body, in their blood, and make it work for them. But there's a couple things that happens that makes Paul decide finally to drink the water of life. He resisted for a good chunk of time. That's why I can't, like I said, I don't know how to answer that, because I don't know if there was just the fact that it didn't happen in the very next Paul chapter. And so maybe that's what you're seeing, what they did in the film as well, because there are several things that take place that aren't in the book. I mean, that are in the book that aren't in the film. Shani gets pregnant. She has a son. The son is murdered by the Sardaukar. And there's a lot of things that happen that gets him to go south, that gets him to now finally do the water of life and all that stuff. And again, those things aren't present for DB's story, because he was not, I don't think he wanted to tell that version of the Dune story.
And all I'm saying is that sequence of events kind of confused me. I was like, wait, what's going on? Like, that's not how I remember watching it in the film. But again, I got to remember, it's an adaptation.
Right.
For good or bad.
And at the end of the day, like to the previous point D'Angelo was making about it being unfilmable, it's stuff like that I think when you get to the second half of the book, like the first half that DD did, I think he did it the right way, chopping it in two, because the easy work was the first half. The second half is where everybody who's tried to film this thing from the 90s, what the 80s, I think was David Lynch. Yeah, David Lynch's movie.
Yeah, it was yep.
Up to now, you're talking 40 some odd years of,
not to mention Jarandowski's the one that he proposed that was show forever, and they just never did anything with it. But there's a lot of legend, and there's actually a documentary, I think, on Max about it. So if any you guys out there are curious about the attempts at making Dune, the efforts over the years, and why it has gained the reputation, in addition to what Josh just pointed out, the reputation for being an unfilmable adaptation.
Yeah, because there's tons of dudes who done, tons of directors who tried to do it over the ensuing 40 years, I would say. Yeah, people have tried, and it's always that second. It seems like it's always that second half of the film when they're like, you know what? I don't think I'm not gonna be able to do it, and then they bow out. It's always the second. I don't know that for a fact, but I think in the doing it, it's that first half that looks easy that I think entraps directors, and then that second half is where they get stuck in the mud, and they're not sure how to interpret, how to translate what's on the page to the screen, because it gets very heady. It's very prose heavy. It's very philosophical. Yeah, and the sequence of events sort of, Herbert's writing is so heavily almost stream of consciousness that it's really hard to sort of nail down a narration structure. Yeah, narration and scene structure. It's really, I could see it being really difficult to do that. So I get, there's no shade on anybody who tried and decided, pass. Because it looks, it reads kind of insane. It's not a traditionally structured book.
Oh, especially and definitely not a traditionally structured science fiction or fantasy story at all. No, even though it has those beats, because Dune is the classic example of Joseph Campbell's A Hero of a Thousand Faces, AKA the monomyth, aka the hero's journey. Outside of the Bible, Dune is the best example of that, of showing that sort of arc in storytelling. But you're right, it's so difficult. And another reason is because, when you get out of part one and you enter part two, you skipped at least a few years. Like, by the time we get to Paul confronting the Emperor and Baron Harkonnen, at least from the fall of House Atreides, at least 5 or so years have passed, if I'm not mistaken. 3 to 5 years have passed. It's not, and so that's another part of the difficulty that these filmmakers find is how do you bridge in one film a story that takes place over the course of several years and not just like, in that same year or a few months or whatever, as most stories do.
That was one of my gripes with the movies. I was like, I have no sense of time, and didn't realize that much time had passed during his.
Which works for him.
I mean, it's fine, but it bugged me for some reason, and I was just like, wait, what's going? Like, how did this happen? Like, when did this happen? I just felt like it went too fast. But again, after reading the book, I understand a little bit better of why that was done. But I will say, when I read how Alia murders Baron Harkonnen in the book, and the fact that as Paul is going to confront Baron and Emperor, he knows his child is dead. I was like, what? And I'm texting you guys like, yo, did I miss when he had a first child in the movie? He was like, no.
Yeah, no, the kid just wasn't, they didn't go that far. I mean, you don't even see Chani and Paul. We see them intimate, but it's very PG-13 intimacy versus the in the books where they're together.
But I also want to note this. So when we talked about concubines in the world of Dune and how that is understood, when I watch the film and I see Paul Atreides chooses Irulan as a wife, I got it from a real world standpoint of why he's doing this, right? But I also then I was like, but there's something missing. I feel like this is an important thing that's happening. Whereas in the book, I understand why and all the things that led up to that decision and why Chani felt the way she did, because, you guys are telling me she killed for Paul. I didn't get that in the movie. I didn't understand how deep that connection was and how, quote unquote, ride or die for Paul she was. Until I read how much she was really believing it.
Oh, very, very.
And also, I understood the political, because the same relationship Leto had with Jessica is kind of what Paul is telling Chani, and Jessica explains this to Chani.
Yeah.
She was like, he will never love her like he loved you.
That
title.
That moment was the redeeming moment for Jessica, because up to that point, she's the reason why there was such a rift between Chani and Paul. She from the very beginning knew that Paul was attracted to her. I mean, this is the girl that he was describing from his dreams. And so she knew that Chani was special to Paul, but she also is hyper aware of the political situation that they're in and knows that the better choice for Paul in terms of marriage would be Irulan. And there's an irony to that, right? Because she didn't do her duty. And that's what led them to that situation and having to fight their way back to prominence. Because if she had Paulina Atreides instead of Paul, the Harkonnens the Emperor wouldn't have felt as threatened as he did.
None of that crap would have happened.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of
still be alive. They'd be chugging along like normal.
They'll be chugging along. But it just begs the question. That's what I'm saying when you think about the choices that he's made, because every time I come to that ending and Zendaya's Chani, because I think we have to make that distinct. This is a distinctively different version of Chani than any previous version, either in the books or in the adaptations. And so again, I'm thinking more where it's going to be a curious thing to see how he then picks it up, because he has Paul say that she forgives him. He saw it. He says that in the film that he said, so he knows that, but in the story, it's made clear to Channing, look, she's a wife, but only because he needs her, and he's never going to love her, never going to teach. And Paul even tells Channing this, and he tells this, I don't remember if he says this to Irulan in Messiah, or if it's in at the end of Dune, but
it's in Messiah. I know what you're about to say. It's in Messiah.
You know what I'm talking about, but he legitimately has a scene where he comes to Irulan, and because she wants it. She wants to lay with Paul because she wants children. Irulan wants children, but she has to settle for taking care of Chinese children. And he tells her, he's like, I will never give you.
I will never.
He's like, I will never. And he's like, you can go out and you can have that with any man you want. He's like, no, you can go out and you can have pleasure and all that. You can do whatever you want, but you will never have my children. And he makes that clear. He's like, you will never. He said he tells her Channy is the mother of his children, the only mother of his children.
Hectic.
Yeah.
And it breaks her too.
Yeah, it did. It really does break Irulan. She does not know how to react to that, and as a result, it leads her to betraying Paul. But he knew that too. He knew that this act and all of this was leading to a betrayal, but not in one of those betrayals where it's more like she is. And Josh, both of you guys can. Well, Josh, you could probably speak more to it because it's Dune aside, but the betrayal was more less hell hath no fury and more she is a dutiful Bene Gesserit, but she's also mad. She's also
it's fueled by both. I would agree. It's fueled by both.
Yeah.
I would say it's definitely fueled by both. Yeah, she's scornful a little bit.
Definitely.
But also, you know, her calculation is if I take Shani off the board, then Paul will love me. Like her emotional calculus is if I take Shani off the board, he'll love me. And that's more an emotional sort of more an emotional calculation than it is a proper Bene Gesserit sort of 3 moves ahead on the chessboard kind of situation. She's hoping that happens, as opposed to it being like, I know if I do, like Bene Gesserit are pretty good at that.
It's also a part of a larger plot too, right? The murder, the poison, her role and what she's doing to Channy is a part of a bigger plot to take down Paul, and they have to do it that way because of his prescient sight. There's nothing that they could do that he won't know that they're doing, and that only gets worse with Leto number 2. If I got him.
Let me mention something before I forget. Because I was trying to figure out, were the Bene Gesserit and more so Jessica using the Fremen, or were the Fremen using Paul and Jessica to believe their own hype? Because because when I did a little bit digging, it comes to find out that Jessica kind of got lucky in answering Snape's about what the knife meant about the maker. She didn't finish. Shot.
Yeah.
And so she was just got lucky and said the right answer, but they were just there. Like the Bene Gesserit, from what I listened to and read, they set up pieces around the world. So whenever they believe in that superstition, whatever their cult believing is, they have places of power. And so, what's the Reverend Mother that tested Paul? What's her name?
Gaius Helene Mohine. Helena Mohine.
So, they're just they're manipulative, but, they just believe in their own quote unquote shit. But it just so happens the Fremen had their own culture and they believed something, and the Bene Gesserit believed something. It just seemed that everything clicked at one point, and it just worked. There, now, I was gonna say because she excuse me, she got lucky. She fell into a live and went with it. But then I started noticing Jessica went from like gradual changes. She went from being a mother to like moving the politics of the Bene Gesserits and on the position of power back to a mother again. Because she becomes afraid, scared, more powerful, pushing Paul, and then she becomes afraid of Paul, and then she becomes understanding of Paul.
Yeah, I think
she sees the cross sections because there's sort of in the Venn diagram of the Fremen and the Bene Gesserit, and then what's going on with House Atreides. There's a cross section, and she sees it all, and she's able to sort of sit in that pocket and manipulate all of it. What's going on with the Fremen? What's going on with the Bene Gesserit? The Bene Gesserit, the Fremen are aware of the Bene Gesserit. They call them witches. And he's aware. Particularly Stilgar is hyper aware of who and what she is and what he's capable of. And she sort of plays the role. She plays everybody. She plays Paul. She plays Still. She plays everyone, and without really betraying anybody because she heard the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, she even played them. I was going to say she even played them, the Bene Gesserit. I mean, she's a very very interesting character in that. But I just wanted to say really quick to your point earlier about ask the question about whether or not with the Bene Gesserit, what they did in spreading their order around the universe. And that's true. That is what they did. And the Fremen were a part of that manipulation. Like, it wasn't, they have their own beliefs, but a lot of the stuff with the Lisan al-Gaib, the Mahdi, that's fueled by the Bene Gesserit, because that's still referencing the Kwisatz Haderach, like the one with that, like that's, no matter what you call it, it's the same figure. Almost, you could call God Allah or whatever, all these different names, but it's the same.
That's what I was saying. That's why I was saying, like, Jessica manipulates that cross section really, really well and very adept.
I will say one thing, and this is unrelated to this topic. It's kind of like an Easter egg. In the book, Fenring didn't realize he was one of the candidates to be the chosen one. In the book, I understood because the Emperor looks to Fenring and says, "I need you to kill Paul Atreides." Fenring, basically, I'm shortening this. Fenring looks at Paul, and Paul looks at him, and they have a mutual understanding. They understood, like, nah, I'm not going to do that because I know I know what he went through. And Paul realizes Fenring was once groomed to be the chosen one himself, but didn't make it. And I think that was a very interesting thing that I didn't catch obviously it wasn't in the movie, but in the book, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
And then Fenring was also, so that's sort of what you eventually learn about that character, that he actually went through the Dam Jabbar, which I wanted to mention, Alia being a little Reverend Mother, that's what she hits the Baron with, is the Dam Jabbar. It's like she popped him with it, and I think what's great about that is if you think about what Gaius Helena Mohaim said to Paul, is I'll stick you with this if you prove that you can't control yourself, if you act like an animal. What is the Baron doing right as she pokes him? Screaming, here's this child, and he's like trying to shake her, and I'll kill her myself, Your Highness. And she's like, oh, animal. Like, poked him with it, and so interestingly enough, it made that moment less about vengeance and more about restoring order, which is what that whole scene was. It was about restoring order. And it started with Alia when she killed probably someone who should have got the Dam Jabbar a long time ago, but he manipulated his way through that test.
Yo, shout out to Faye Rotha for actually trying to execute the Baron. I thought that was a little interesting in the book. How even though he's being groomed to be the next one, Baron is dropping jewels. He was like, yo, if you come at the king, you better not miss.
Yeah.
I'm teaching you a lesson. This is what you got to expect. So,
and they show that a bit in the film when the Baron allows the Atreides warrior to come at Fade Rotha full tilt, and he knew that could possibly kill him. So I just brought that up and then Fade Rotha says, "Next time you do that, I'll kill you." I think I brought that up to say that, to his credit, DV was finding ways of showing those things that were in the book that were great, like the fact that Fade Rotha and the Baron have this really weird, perverse relationship where they are often trying to kill one another, and they have fun with it. They take delight in it, because you saw that with the Baron. He's like not sorry or afraid of Fade. He enjoys that. It almost gives him a perverse sexual delight.
Yeah, he's like, you enjoy your birthday present, son? Like,
can
yo,
you guys hear me?
Bro. Yes, we can.
Okay, because I was going to say, we got the sense in the movie that Baron set Fade up, but in the book, Fade tried to set the Baron up with a male sex slave.
Yeah, he tried to kill him. The Baron killed the slave, and then I don't remember and then he confronted him about, but as you saw, it wasn't an anger of, wow, he just tried to betray me and kill me and take the inheritance.
It's in the Harkonnens' nature.
Yeah,
it's almost like the Sith thing.
This is what we do.
Yeah, it's like, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. And that's why I think visually the Harkonnens look the way they do in DV's film. Because remember, there's several times that before we see them that's alluded to. What does Gurney tell Paul? You've never dealt with Harkonnens. They're brutal. They're not even human. You know what I'm saying? And then what does we got that juxtapositioning of the Harkonnen are the worst of the great houses and the families, and what humanity has, and on that level, evolved to, because that's another part of his philosophy and the storytelling, is showing the different ways in which humanity has spread itself across the galaxy, and has then began to evolve culturally, physically, in different ways, diversely from one another. The Fremen have evolved in a much different way than people who live on Caladan have evolved, or people who live on Secundus Mundus, the planet of House Carano, or even the Gadi Prime. If you look at Gadi Prime, the way it's depicted, they don't look like human. The way that the Sardaukar speak, that guttural, like that's the visual showing of the base of Herbert's storytelling, which is, this future is a future in which humanity has moved past decadence and has evolved in a very diverse way, in every way that you think of, not just physically, because there's also these characters that aren't introduced. What is they called? The Ixians. Oh, they make machines and they make all kind of crazy things, but they're not entirely human the same way that, the Atreides are. And then there's another, the Spacing Guild. They're human,
right?
But they're not human, not like us.
They're way evolved. Yeah.
Yes, they're way evolved. And there's a character in Dune Messiah that helps us see this evolution and why, and these other characters. And the same thing with the Bene Gesserit. The implication is that they have evolved. It's not an arcane art, or they're not spell working or anything. When Jessica drinks the water a lot, she talks about it. I'm literally transmuting the poison in my blood into my blood. It's like it's combining it with the properties with my own blood. So that is a way in which it's more science fiction than a lot of sci-fi out there, because it deals with hard science in that way.
Noted. Noted. I will rank this up there with one of the best sci-fi readings I've gotten into, read or watch. I mean, The Expanse is up there, but Dune is up there too, and I see why so many people wanted to film this because it's gold. It's a lot of good character development, world building, interesting plot lines and whatnot. So I get the hype. I didn't get the hype until I was like, I still didn't even get the hype when I watched the movie. I was like, okay, it's kind of slow, but like in the book, it gets to the action quickly. I'm like, oh, this is different.
We've also all been diluted by 40, 50 years of having science fiction defined for us in a way that isn't great. It's fun. We love it, but
and a lot of it is derivative of Dune. Like there's so many films, so many stories that pick apart their different pieces and different aspects of
Dune.
How the Dune story is told.
Even
probably the most blatant culprit.
Absolutely. And even if you look at George R. R. Martin's writing, you always talk about Game of Thrones, Dune influences. You can see it. If you think about it, there are lots of Dune influences.
Wait, what did I call it, Dune? Game of Thrones just hopped up on spice?
Yeah, exactly. He has the same beats in the way that they develop stakes, and this is about the choices these characters make, and sometimes those choices put them on the bad road to a bad ending, and it's not a happy ending type of a thing. Cool. I think we just had a real good Dune chat. So before we could talk all day about Dune, because as you point out, it's just so good in that way. So I'm gonna let you guys talk about what give your final thought about this adaptation conversation. Now that Josh, you've had the privilege of reading 4 of the books, seeing 3 different types of adaptations. What is your favorite, or what has your favorite been? And what are you looking forward to in terms of the future? Because there's a couple things. There's the show on Max, right, and then there's the DB's going to try to do the movie.
So favorite, believe it or not, you're going to be shocked to hear me say the 80s joint. The 80s joint is what started me on the journey, because it made absolutely no sense. And I was like, all right. This is way too celebrated a book for this movie to be representative of what's in that book. There's no way. And I didn't realize what I was getting into at the time. And when I dived in, like I famously tell you guys, I read Dune on a Palm Pilot. That's how long ago it was that I read that joint. And I didn't realize how long it was going to be when I read it. So I'm like 2 weeks in, and I'm still reading this thing. I'm like, yo, damn, how much longer do I have to go? I mean, it's good, so I don't care. But
eyes are blood, like the blood bathe in your eyes look like rain.
Yo, shout out to 24 for showing Palm Pilot technology on the first episode.
Hey. But yeah, I think I have different affection for different versions. Like I like the 80s joint was just way over the top. With what little of the book it did adapt. The Sci-Fi Channel joint, like we were talking about, is inarguably the most detailed. Like it takes literally like 5-6 days to tell the story. It takes like 5-6 hours to tell the whole story. And then DV is easily the best visual representation. In my book, it's the best stylized, it's the best visually speaking, and it nails the aesthetic. You really do. Whereas the Sci-Fi Channel, it leaps off the page in a certain type of way. I think DV, you could tell, wanted to try to, again, and going back to the visuals, that he wanted to make a visual as accurate a visual representation and creative a visual representation as he felt he could. I don't think we're going to see somebody else do this again for another, and maybe never, but certainly not for another 20, 30 years. I don't see. I mean, it's Hollywood, so some dumb-dumb's going to try to do it. I wouldn't listen. I take a challenge on anything. If I ever get to the point where that's something that is offered to me to try to adapt, I would have to enlist D'Angelo. Like it wouldn't even be a question mark. I don't know anyone else that I think that has production and writing capabilities that has a grasp of the source material better than D'Angelo does. Short of that, I wouldn't want to do it. Like I know I'd fail. As much as I like the challenge, as nice as I am, I like to, with science fiction, I don't think I could do it by myself.
I don't think anybody could. No, I was going to say, I add to what you were saying, I don't think anybody could, but honestly, I don't think I could do it unless I had some people assassinated. I'm talking about because of the people that's making those decisions up top. That's gonna be like, change this and change that, and change this, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, you're not letting me do my thing. It's like what happened with Blade Runner, in the early '90s with Ridley Scott.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think I don't see anybody doing it ever again. And I will be interested to see what he does with Dune Messiah, he being DB. Cam, I think the question is different for you because, again, you're fresh into this. So what I want to know is, which one what, do you feel like Dune Messiah should be adapted now that you have read the first Dune? You've seen the film, and you understand. You have a better understanding, grasp of adaptations of Dune itself, Herbert's narrative style, his philosophy, everything, structure, all that. So you know how DV is approaching this. What do you think? Do you think he should stay away from it, or you think he should try his luck?
I can't honestly answer that because I need to read Dune Messiah. I need to read Children of Dune. However, I think he did it some form of justice. And to be fair, I probably have a better answer if I was able to watch the other iterations of the miniseries and the film and compare and contrast and say if this because I did a good job. Yeah, so I'll say this. What I'm looking forward to is reading the next couple books, Children of Dune, Dune Messiah, God Emperor Dune. I'm gonna read those.
I'll see you next year. What you talk about that?
Yeah.
No, actually I'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah. Can this be filmed? Sure. It can be filmed. Will it do it justice? That's yet to be determined because he did make some interesting choices. For better or worse. But we'll see how he ties it up in this third installment. And does he answer some of my questions, or does he wrap it up in a way that is satisfactory to the people who've read Dune? If I didn't read Dune, I would have been like, oh, this is cool. But I did feel like something was missing.
I wanted to ask you, actually, let me switch it up. Now that you've read it, you have a fresh perspective. How did the ending with Chani play for you versus in the book versus the movie? I want to know your feeling about that because I'm still wrestling with it every time I see it. I think, let me make it clear. I think that DV, the way he depicts Chani is great. Because I think it gives her layers to not just fall into Paul's line of bullshit, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of being a leader, it gives her more depth than just following the line in agency. But what do you feel? I mean, we talked about our opinion when we did the review, but now you can actually give insight about DV adaptation Channy versus source text Channy.
I don't want to say he didn't do her justice because, in a sense, he kind of did, but it's his version.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, when I saw the ending, this is what made me want to read the book. The ending. I was like, nah, something's missing. This is an important thing happening right now, and I don't understand why. That's what made me go read the book, to understand who Channy is in the book, to have a better perspective of how Channy is being depicted in the movie, and understand the nuances of why Paul made some of these decisions, why Channy was doing these decisions. I'm not going to say he didn't do her justice, but I did leave the feeling, I was like, the movie's cool. This was my opinion of it before I read the book. I was like, the movie's cool, but I need to go read the book because I feel like I'm not understanding something. And I'm not seeing the whole picture of some of the decisions that was made by the director. And I'm not saying they're bad. It's just I felt it was a piece missing.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest. I didn't feel satisfactory with certain part. And that one in particular stood out a lot for me.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, it didn't sit with me well until I read the book. And I was like, oh, okay, now I understand. Now I get who Channy is. I get what Paul is doing. I get the struggle Paul was having, the struggle with Jessica. I get the struggle with Jessica and Channy, which I didn't get in the movie too much, but I got a more nuanced understanding. That's understandable. Reading the book, you're going to get all that nuance and whatnot. But DV, I guess, did the best he could to give us the best resolution to that ending.
Yeah. Was it more, you think it was more about leaving us with a visual philosophical thought than it was an actual confirmation of where the narrative is going? Because that was what I was thinking as I watched. I'm like, this is disparate enough to where we don't know where these characters are going to be in a follow-up. You know, Paul doesn't, that he and Channy just exchange a look, and then we see her getting ready to head back into the desert. And we can make all kinds of assumptions, but I felt it was more of a philosophical ending than it was a narrative ending. Agreed.
I agree with you, but it did leave me asking, like, what next?
Oh yeah,
and how next?
Most philosophy.
Like, what's next? Like, so I agree with you guys. I just felt empty. The ending, I was not satisfied. That's the best answer I can give you. And I say by reading, it gave me a sense of some closure and understanding why I didn't make that choice.
I was satisfied, but it was like, it left me, knowing what comes next, it left me kind of quizzical. Like, well, all right, so if Shani breaks out, then how does Paul have kids with her later on? If you know, like, how does any of that happen if she leaves? Like, I could see a scenario where she has the conversation, where Shani has the conversation with Jessica later on, where like she sort of tries to swing her back around on some, listen, this was a marriage of convenience. He does not love this chick. He loves you. Like, he doesn't love Caroline. He did it
has to impress upon her that Paul, she's important to Paul. No, I was saying she would, in that same scene, would sound like it would be an impressing upon Channy that she's actually important to Paul and that he really does need her.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? Oh, sorry, not to cut you off, but before you go any further, the two perspectives we're offering, I'm reading from this perspective of, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few books. So I'm like, kind of like, how's this going to work? You guys kind of already know and wondering how the director is going to convey whatever's in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, listen, turn the hell out. He's going to turn the hell out of that butt.
Yeah, I purposely did not read any further, didn't look into any Easter eggs, insight about the books after Dune until I'm done with the books. So you guys have obviously a head start of knowing what's going to happen, but you're wondering how it's going to be portrayed in the movie. Where I'm like, both, how's it going to be portrayed in the movie, and what the hell's going to happen with Channy? Go for it. You know, I was going.
Yeah. So we'll get there. We're all in the same.
Yeah, and that way we're all in the same boat because now we have no idea what he's going to do. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen next.
That's a good point. As far as Channy goes, we don't know. what he has in mind. But I think he will be hard pressed to deviate from the situation between she and Ireland, because that's significant enough that it's a part of what's at stake, and it's a part of the thing that elevates the narrative to a different place.
He's gonna change it so that Shawnee kills Ireland.
Yeah, I just got, I love that the cast that they did. I thought Zendaya was brilliant as Shani, at least for what she's able to do. And even though she wasn't in it as much either, I thought that Florence Pugh really understood Ireland's position in her role, who she was to each person. She's different in almost every scene when she's talking to her father, or when she's laying down, when she's recording, playing the role of historian and doing her journal, versus when she's in the room and she realizes that it was Gaius Helena Mulhane who put the bug in her father's ear to destroy House Atreides, and there she portrays it with a lot of with the nuances that you look for in those situations, where it goes from genuinely surprised to a resolve of, I'm still the Emperor's daughter. So she goes from shocked at that to, well, you can't just outright kill him, then you make him a martyr, to strategize it. So it's like, she does that really well. So casting is what land in there too.
To basically turning against her father on some, I run it now.
Yeah, basically. And she tells, she knows that she's the key. Like if there's a saving grace in this situation, in that moment, she knows she's got to offer herself to Paul. There's no way that, because Paul was going to kill Shaddam, like right there. He was going to kill him, summarily execute him. And he's going to kill, he already told the Fremen to kill every Sardaukar that was there. There was no hope for them. But the others, they had to play up to what he could do, what they could do for him in that situation. Yeah. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, when you said mentioned kill all the Sardaukar, Aliyah was walking around killing the wounded Sardaukar.
Yeah, that's actually how she gets the nickname of the night. I forgot about that. That's how she earned, because she didn't earn it from killing the Baron, because they couldn't see how she killed the Baron. But that it's the Gom Jabbar. He sets it up perfectly from the very beginning. But yes, she walks around and literally stabs each Sardaukar who's wounded, and she kills him, and that's how she gets the name Aliyah the Knife.
Salute.
Yeah. Well, cool. You guys have heard it here, us unpacking the adaptations of Dune, and as you see, we love it, and we have our various different opinions on storytelling and the writing and production, and we love to talk about it and bring our own expertise and thoughts and imagination to the story. Remember, you can find us on Spotify and SoundCloud and Apple Music and other places that you might be able to listen to your podcast. And check us out on our regular show, the Blerdlines Reviews. And also, we will be doing more news roundup shows, a two-man job, two-host job. But with that, we are out.
Yeah.